Hello, everyone. Welcome to Leading with Agility, the show that uses the world around us to explore how leadership can be inspired by agility. I'm your regular host, Arif, and I'm joined by
your regular co-host, TK.
Thank you, TK. And today we actually don't have a guest joining us because we wanted to explore a topic TK has been thinking about over the past few weeks. So, TK, would you mind introducing our topic of discussion today to our audience, and then we'll take it from there?
Absolutely. I've been thinking about quite a few topics recently, but you know what? Observing the universe and what people are doing recently, I've noticed that obviously, I don't know, this quarter is maybe a quarter of transition for many people. And I've seen people that obviously are looking for new careers, exploring stuff. And I also, talking with a bunch of people, I've been reflecting on the traditional career path and the fact that there's something called a non-linear career path, and maybe it's a bit more difficult for leaders.
Okay. And sounds interesting. When we say a bit more difficult, are we talking about finding the next role or moving ahead in the career ladder? What do you think is quite difficult in what you're seeing?
Well, the difficulty is that the career is a bit non-standard, but with the difficulty, maybe there's also some effectiveness inclined in it. So what I thought about is the fact that, when you think, Arif, about a traditional career path, a traditional perception of what a leader's journey is, like the CEO of Nike, Elliot Hill, he's been there since 1999 and started as an intern, as a sales intern, and then he progressed throughout his career, throughout all the levels of corporate functions and leadership, and became a CEO. And that's something that people would probably think as to be a traditional path of leadership, and this is how people maybe expected leaders to rise through the ranks.
Right.
I'm sure you know many examples like that.
Yeah, I'm probably our listeners. In fact, probably working with colleagues right now who've followed or are following that type of traditional promotional way of getting up the career ladder. Right? That's pretty standard.
Indeed, and this is what we've been taught. This is what we've been experiencing throughout culture and seeing movies, seeing people in our families doing that. But my question is this traditional and linear path really valid for the leaders of the future? I mean, if you look at, how priorities of people have changed post 2020, Gartner has made a survey, and it's US based as always, but I think, in many other markets, it also is quite accurate. And what they have discovered is 65% of people agreed that the pandemic shifted their attitudes towards the important aspects of work or aspects outside of work.
Right.
While, the 50% of other people said that it's their expectation towards their employer have changed. And I'm wondering, from your experience, Arif, people that you talk to, our clients, do you see a shift post 2020?
I think you're right. I mean, the nature of work has changed anyway. We noticed it setting up Humble, where we had to very quickly shift to being online more, less in person for obvious reasons, and then that's followed through with far more flexible hybrid working patterns. I think the way people obviously consume information, consume knowledge, has also shifted far more when it comes to things like podcasts, webinars, bite size, that type of consumption of information is also shifted. And so that all has an impact in how people perceive their careers need to be. And interestingly, a couple of weeks ago, I was at a HR leaders conference, and there were a couple of guests there reflecting on some of this. One particular guest was talking about the future state of organizations, and he described it as the 2030 organization. So, from his point of view, and there are now people thinking about this far more, about how to radically redesign organizations to shift from a very traditional perspective of, you have a particular foundational skill or area of expertise through your education, certification, whatever it might be, as you said, lawyer, or you're an accountant, or a marketer, let's say, right?
Mm-hmm.
To what he was arguing for is a far more skill-based organization. So
Yes.
in the future, what we'll see is an organization where they will be matching skills to problems. So it's like, okay, we have this particular problem in the business that we need to solve. What type of skills do we need? Okay, let's look at through our, so to speak, Rolodex of skills that we have in the organization. Okay, we have a group of people here who have got the right analytical skills over here. We've got a group here who know about influencing, persuading, communicating, whatever. We need those people, bring them together, form a team, and here you go. We want you to solve this particular problem. So this is very much now ignoring the idea of, well, I need a marketer, I need an accountant, I need this, I need that, but actually I need the skills.
But and
Go
I've
on, go
definitely,
on.
I've seen this happening.
Oh, you
But
have
there's an
already?
interesting
Okay,
aspect. Well, I've seen this focus being there, but there's a
right.
challenge with that, and maybe
Okay.
this is the difficulty, because many people associate their roles, their job, with their identity. And if we're saying, and I agree with you completely, that we're going more into a skill based role, or skills taking center stage in our career progression, it's an interesting one. I don't know what you think, Arif, but when people, you meet new people and so on, they try to figure out not who you are, but what you do,
Mm,
as in that defines who you are. But
right.
in this new world, if it is changing, which I think it is,
Mm,
you probably can't list the your skills
yeah.
that quickly. So I'm wondering how these
Well,
conversations might go. Do you see the same pattern?
I get what your point is, but I think then you're going to be focused far more on outcomes, then, aren't you? Because I worked on these type
Mm-hmm.
of programs, I've done this type of work, I've achieved these type of outcomes, and this is what I enjoy doing. And so, it's less about me being as you said, a lawyer, solicitor, whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
it's me solving these type of challenges. Perhaps I don't know, but I wanted to bring another point into the
Yes,
conversation, because you started off this idea of the conversation with this idea of non-linear paths to
indeed.
career progression. There is actually a book out there talking exactly about this. Two ladies, Helen Tupper, Sarah Ellis, have written a book called The Squiggly Career, and
Yes,
it literally
well
does
known
this.
one indeed.
Yeah,
Yes,
well known. They have a podcast too, so if you want to learn more about squiggly careers, there you go. But that is all about them describing this phenomena of careers now taking very non-linear paths, and actually, it's about how you can design the career you want based on your strengths and the
mm-hmm.
skills that you have. So, more evidence than that is potentially where the world is shifting to, TK. Um,
Yeah, but
but
let's
then,
define it a bit more, right?
go
So
on.
this the non-linear career is, something that you work across industries, you work across roles, levels
Mhm.
of seniority, you can often change them to, taking breaks, sabbaticals,
Mm.
stuff like that. So there's no like really well paved road that you're designing. That's a non-linear career. And you're saying that you're supposed to design it. And it sounds wonderful, although I would think that it might be quite challenging to you know isn't designing a non-linear career making it traditional? I would always think that a squiggly or a non-linear career is something that emerges from the need in the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose so. And with the way the economy is right now,
Mm.
and let's talk about that. I think that's the elephant in the room a little bit. Especially here in the UK, there is definitely more supply than demand. Let's say, in terms of people looking for roles versus what's out there. So then it becomes a case of needs must, isn't it? As in,
Hmm.
you've got responsibilities, perhaps bills to pay, whatever livelihood to earn. You may need to go and look for and do a role that it might not be you're most interested in. It might not be what you're most interested in doing. Sorry, but
Okay.
it is definitely something you're capable of doing, shall we say? And you might excel at it because of the experiences you got, and so you've got to do that. So I think you're right in some extent. To some extent, sorry, you are right to some extent that perhaps it is a time and place thing, and there are other levers at play that will have an impact as to your ability to go down this squiggly route or stick to that traditional route. Perhaps that's maybe my thoughts on that.
Well, I was thinking it's true, right? Sometimes you're forced into a non-linear career by circumstances that, unfortunately, where you are, what time, in terms of the economy cycle you're in, that happens too. But what I'm thinking is possibly something adjacent to it, which is when you actually throw yourself out there and see what's needed at the moment, what you discover. Because when you think about a career, it's obviously a long-term projection of what you want to happen. But looking at, for instance, myself, and maybe also, Arif, you can share, your thoughts there, is when someone asked me when I was really young in my first role, what do you want to achieve? Where do you want to be in this company? I can't remember the exact question they've asked, but what I do remember when I was asked a question like, where do you want to go, is I had no idea. Like the answer I gave, which I distinctly remember, is I just want to be useful. I just want to be helpful for the company, because these were my values at the time. I possibly should have been wiser, although I was young, to be able to, design my career. And definitely, I would say it wasn't necessarily the most linear one out there. But I'm wondering, what's your ability to design your career, especially when you're starting? What was your story, Arif?
No, you're right. And I think I can reflect on some of that in going back when I was starting off my first ever graduate role. And when you're young and inexperienced in the ways of the world and the ways of the working world, it's difficult to see past the immediate 1 year, 2 years of what life can look like. I think from a career point of view, at least that was my experience. And because of your level of the rank you occupy, a very junior position perhaps, that has an impact in your ability to look that far ahead, because I think for me anyway, you're thinking about, well, how much agency choice do I have? I have to do what the system, organization, etc. expects of me. Otherwise, I'm not going to have a job, and potentially, and then I'm going to be in trouble. So I have to just do what I'm doing and keep doing it, right? And there's some vague notion of at some point I'll reach somewhere where then I can start thinking about the life world outside of this organization, for example.
Okay.
It took me a few years before I got to that point. And then it was a case of, I've now learned some skills and experiences, which it was a light bulb in some ways. There's some uniqueness to this. I have something which I can now go elsewhere and offer that. And I feel like I have some choice in what I want to do next. I don't have to stay here. I can go and do something else. And I did do that. And then once you do that once, I think then it can open the door to like, okay, it's okay to move roles or move organizations or do something different and develop your interests in a way you'd like them to be developed. And I think that confidence just grows over time. And that's how I was able to shift from role to role, moving from a permanent kind of role to a more flexible contracting type of position and so on. So I think there is agency. Everyone has agency. And it's about really, if you're interested in owning your career, then assessing your skills, assessing your interests, what you like, what you don't like, and then figuring out, okay, where else can I apply this? Does it have to be here? Does it have to be in this organization, in this team? Can I do it in a different place? Could I try it somewhere? And exploring the options that exist. That's how I would say.
While that's true, I think there's another aspect, and I think the one that I find quite interesting when it comes to squiggly careers or non-linear careers. And this is why I think, there might be a bit of a difficulty for leaders to both embrace for themselves and to embrace into people they, get to build their teams, which is sometimes you can be taking something that might feel like a step back. Now, when you described your journey, Arif, and, my journey was quite similar, what was happening is I always felt like I was progressing. Right? There's always something that was a bit of a progress. Having said that, I'm thinking about, what would it mean to open yourself to maybe taking a step back. I recently met someone that they're a physician, a medical doctor, but they also have a degree in chemistry. And they're a bit fed up with the medical profession and, their field of speciality, and they wanted to go and find a job in in the chemical industry.
Right.
And they were offered, not offered a position, they were invited for an interview for a very, entry level job. And, it was an interesting conversation when this person walked out of the room and the people were talking about this particular situation. How many people felt like taking a quote unquote step back like this is not a decent life choice? Whereas I believe that for this person in this moment, maybe it is a good life choice. Now, this is a bit of a, I wouldn't say a conflict. I would say, a bit of a dichotomy. How do you know?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Well, a proper squiggly one, right?
Yeah, and I don't know. Maybe go back to what we were talking about earlier, TK, about how do you know? I was just talking to someone before we started recording this episode about exploring their, the passions and what they're good at and that kind of thing, and noting all of that down actually helps to clear up for themselves what they want to do next with their career direction. So once knowing that, then I think it makes it easier to then figure out, okay, I want to do this, and I know I'm going to do this consciously because it is something I definitely want to do, and I can be good at it because I've understood for myself likes, dislikes, my qualities, my passions, and so on. So I think it just goes, it's the self-reflection, self-awareness point, isn't it, TK? You've got to take. That's what I said earlier about it's all a choice, and you all have agency. You've got to take charge of your own career and decide what you want for yourself. I do wonder, though. I mean, like we talked about leaders at the start, and then you said, this is perhaps a phenomenon affecting leaders right now. Maybe it is, and you've done the research on this, but I think it's wider than that. I think it is a societal challenge. Like I said earlier, we've got a supply and demand problem. We've got a lot of supply and not enough demand. So, I think this is now a time for everyone who's looking for their next role. You've got to really think about what is it you want, but more importantly, reassess your own skills and experiences and position yourself in the best possible way to get the best possible role. Just because you've done something before may not be the appropriate, or it may not be the right time for you to consider doing that same exact thing again, because the market might have moved on,
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's interesting, obviously, these forces, and we've talked about like 2020, right? It's been nearly 5 years, but there are tectonic shifts. You're absolutely right. The market is moving on. And yet, it's interesting how the traditional advice of you have to have 18 years and 12 years experience or something like that. It is an interesting thing that I think this kind of approach, this kind of reevaluation, putting yourself out there, in my mind, is definitely creating, probably anxiety in people that decide to have this non-linear path, but also people hiring candidates like this, right? If you're a leader, if you're a hiring manager, now, you're used to seeing CVs, you're used to seeing natural progression, you have a certain story in mind, and what you get is cognitive dissonance, someone that's offering a very different package. So I would be wondering, how do I know that this person can
fit.
deliver the value, right? And we can talk about it after the break, possibly in the next part of our podcast. But what I find interesting when it comes to like being a hiring manager, which I've interviewed quite a few people and so on, what was difficult is like really knowing that this is a good investment. There's so much coming into this, and what people have been looking for, including myself, to be honest, although, it's been a few years since I've been like interviewing people based on their CV, is congruence and a certain compliance and maybe being really aligned to a certain story. But this is the opposite, isn't it?
Um, Maybe. I mean, I was just going back to my notes for that talk I attended at that conference, and the speaker talking about the 2030 company, right? And some of the things he was noting down around what the future looks like, in his view, were around actually organizations want people who can come in and get results fast. They want people who can execute very quickly. They're very dynamic. They're able to take on a role, maybe potentially move to a different role very quickly as well. So, excuse me, the needs of organizations is definitely changing. And then on the flip side of that, we've talked about Gen Z multiple times on this podcast
Yes.
with guests and previously as well with in an older episode. But they're looking for, funnily enough, stability in the same way most employees are, right? So they want they want the ability to progress very quickly in an organization. That may be true, and that may be something that previous working generations weren't as quick to vocalize when starting their careers, which is, where am I? How do I get to the next role? What do I need to do to get there, etc. That may be a difference in culture slightly, but they want the same thing in the end, which is I want stability. I need to know where I'm going. I like the openness, transparency of my line manager, my directors, bosses, whatever. But there is going to be a clash, I think, and it's coming, which is, like I said, moving to that skills-based world, moving to this world where actually we only need you to do this particular thing, and perhaps we don't need you for as long as we need to do that role. So the way hiring is going to work may be also changing, and we know that it is. We've got AI coming into the picture now, TK,
Indeed,
filtering candidates out at first pass because you've got hundreds and hundreds of CVs or application forms to consider, which has its own challenges. So, and then I think you've got much more rigorous rounds of interviews of employers really dotting I's, crossing T's around what your capabilities are, what your skills are, how you can be effective. So I think the hiring process is getting more intense and brutal, maybe is a word. I think organizations are demanding different things, and as much as Gen Z we hear about so-called, they just want to laze about at work. It's not true. What in fact they want is the same things that everyone else, but at the same time there is a discrepancy, I think. So there we are.
Yes, there's nothing like no, absolutely, Arif. I think you've painted a picture. Maybe there's some tension, there's some drama, there is some suspense, and there's nothing better for a suspense than a proper cliffhanger. So as we've got your attention, our dear listeners, let us invite you for a short break.
Our next webinar will be coming your way on November the 19th, live on LinkedIn. We'll be joined by Chris O'Sullivan, a leader with over 20 years of experience in workplace well-being, to discuss how leaders can better protect their mental health. He'll share practical strategies to help leaders build resilience and thrive under pressure. To register, visit our website, scroll to the bottom of the homepage, and hit that sign up button. See you there. Welcome back, everyone. And before the break, we were discussing the state of play when it comes to hiring and organizations' needs and so on. I think we're going to move the conversation onwards in terms of some practical stuff, perhaps, in terms of how do you assess yourself in terms of your own career direction and that kind of thing. Perhaps from a leadership point of view as well, if you're a leader out there looking at your next career move, what tools are there available to you?
And
TK, I don't know. Yeah, I was gonna bring it to you, TK. I don't know if you want to kick off the
well,
conversation there, perhaps.
I had a look, and I've been, as yourself as a coach, I've been working with a bunch of frameworks, and there's two that I wanted to talk about. I think the most popular is probably Ikigai, which is a Japanese, technique, possibly linking. So, for instance, things like what you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you're good at. And there's like a Venn diagram connecting these. We'll put it in the podcast notes. And this is like a wonderful thing that gives you the passion, mission, vocation, and profession. In the middle of all of it, there's the Ikigai, the famous and the proverbial spot where all of this connects. Now, it's a great thing to see, but I'm wondering about your experience, Arif, when you're working with clients, and you've talked about a coaching conversation before. If you look at the Ikigai diagram, I'm wondering which of these do you find people having the most challenge with when it comes to finding it for themselves?
No, this is a great question, because I think the hardest bit is you got to find. You've got to find something that not only you feel you have a passion for, but you've then got to see if it can pay the bills. I mean, like I have vocations, and you do as well, TK, which I'd love to be able to be paid for them, but how I would get, and it's not how, whether it would be sufficient enough for me to live comfortably, feed my family, etc. I'm not sure it's possible. I mean, I love riding motorbikes, for example. Can I become I don't know, a YouTuber or something, earning money through the vocation of sharing my love about motorbikes? I don't think I can. I mean, I haven't explored it. Maybe I'm not brave enough. Maybe that's the issue. Maybe we're not brave enough to try some of these things out. But I think that's the dimension that I really struggle with. It's really hard. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe the same for you, TK.
It is. I think, because all of these are somewhat external, right? So, what you love, you can feel what you love. What you're good at, chances are you probably can identify that. But when it comes to what the world needs and what the world can pay for, or what you can get paid for, this requires some form of you being able to make the situation in the market. And, we're not necessarily being taught that. And this is where, our agility comes in, trying to make small experiments and trying it out. So the question is it maybe not about a non-linear career, but maybe an agile career, trying these small experiments, seeing if it all bites.
That's interesting, I think, in terms of like what the world needs. I mean, that's such a profound question, right?
I know, right? The Japanese, right?
It's hard. Like, if you say you're I'm going to keep using that example. If you started with this, I'll carry with it. You're an accountant or a lawyer, right? And there's an argument to be had. If you're a lawyer, people might tell you to your face, we need less lawyers in the world. Too many of you people, But that's the wrong question, perhaps. It's like, okay, what is the skill? And what qualities do you possess through your training and vocation of being a lawyer and doing all that work that you can extract and actually think about, through that work, there is something that I'm very good at that I think the world can do better of. Mediation, for example.
Yes.
Mediation could be a great skill. We need more mediation in the world. I think that's a great thing. Does it have to be wrapped up in the framework of law and being a lawyer or barrister or whatever? Maybe it does. But and so that's maybe where you want to focus on instead. I don't know. No easy answers, TK. No easy answers.
Well, with these kinds of frameworks and these kinds of questions, there can't be any easy answers. And what I find the most interesting is this tension between what you can be paid for and actually knowing that this is a good decision to go to. Because we've had many discussions ourselves and with our clients, And there is always this notion of, oh, it takes time. But how do you know that what you're deciding to do, the subset of the things that you love and the subset of the things that you're good at, um, this particular niche, this particular thing, and obviously niching is a big exercise and difficult for many people, will actually work? And the big question I'm asking myself, and the big question we're always grappling with, running a business or doing anything that directly touches the market, is what's the sign, right? The easiest thing to say is, well, the balance on the account or the revenue. But in the modern world, sometimes we do have proxies. And what I'm thinking, Arif, is what have you seen being a good sign for yourself, for other people, that they're going into this direction, that there actually is something in there when it comes to, the economy, and they are able to be paid for it?
Help me understand that one a bit more, TK. So are we talking about, go on, are we talking about like something you really love doing and people are actually adopting that more and more and they're getting paid for it? Is that what you mean? How
do we know, right? If we understand what we're good at, if we understand what we love, and I know that you're quite into product management, your wonderful, thing that you're good at. What is it about ourselves that we can apply from the realm of product management to see that these particular aspects that you love and you're good at can actually be something that people will pay for?
I suppose we're talking about experimentation, isn't it? And trying things out. The question whether it is if our listeners or other folks who are in this position have the time or the energy to want to experiment and try things out, or the desire to do so. I mean, and that just goes back to whether it's something you love doing, you're passionate about, etc. And if you have the passion for, then you might want to. I mean, I mentioned the YouTube thing, but that's not. I wasn't being totally facetious there. I mean, there's a couple of people I follow there, and there's one chap I follow. He was doing all these videos whilst having a job, and clearly you could tell from the way he puts his videos together and the reactions online, etc. People love it. He loved doing it, and he was having a lot of fun at the same time. Something happened in his work where they basically forced him, said, "We can't let you be doing these videos on YouTube and being employed here. So you got to make a choice." And he actually said, "I went home. I talked to my wife. We did some numbers. We did the maths, and I came back to the workplace and said, 'Yep, I'm resigning. Here you go. Here's my notice. I'm off.' And now I'm doing this video stuff full time." So I'm not suggesting to our listeners that's the experiment you need to run, as in go and hand in your notice tomorrow after listening to this, and take it from there. But perhaps starting something small. As a side hustle, I think that's the phrase nowadays, isn't it? Side hustle, see what the reaction is, build up some interest, and then gauge whether it's worthwhile pursuing that vocation as a source of income, maybe.
Oh, that's a good one, right? But if maybe this goes too far for you, if people like you, our dear listeners, are feeling that, oh, it's a bit too much for me to go for. Or on the other hand, you are a leader in the organization that creates the environment to get people's needs met. I have a different framework that I would like to expose to you, which is the Gartner's Human Deal Framework. We'll put it in the podcast notes. That actually has 5 other categories, which let me just iterate through them, and we can talk about it a bit. Which is, first of all, this deal is, what is it that nowadays employees need,
right,
even if it comes to just a job. And one is the deeper connection. So the question or the statement would be, I feel understood. The radical flexibility, which is I feel autonomous. The personal growth, which is I feel valued. The holistic well-being, which is I feel cared for, and shared purpose, which is I feel invested. Now, Gartner believes that this is not in terms of motivating, but this is something that's absolutely necessary to make sure you find your purpose in an organization and what you do. And I'm wondering now, Arif, that I told you that, and I'm probably looking at the article I've shared, which we will link in the podcast notes. I'm wondering which one of these do you think that leaders struggle the most when it comes to creating an environment that would provide it?
Oh, good question. I wonder. There's something about the cared for, valued, that side of the circle when we're looking at this, because I think there's always this tension for me around, results, execution, delivery, but also making sure that people are happy, motivated, enjoying the work, etc. at the same time, right? And when that pressure gets too much, it always flips to we need to execute. That's more important right now. So maybe that's the area where I think maybe it might be harder for leaders or whoever to think about it from their point of view. Actually, never had the time to consider for themselves. Oh, well, yeah, do I feel careful in this organization? Is that something I feel valued about? I'm so focused on getting the work done and delivering and results and so on that there's no time for that.
Absolutely. And this is actually quite interesting, Arif, going back to the start of our conversation, when you've mentioned that now instead of like a job description, a job title, we probably might want to focus on outcomes. And yet, right, what's very important for people is the fact that people need to feel cared for.
Yeah.
Now, I find that very difficult to reconcile and square because, in my personal opinion, it basically requires a lot of deconstruction of our thinking about work and thinking about our employer. There's obviously typical McGregor's X and Y and these kinds of theories, but essentially, many people really struggle to understand how their performance is basically saying, or them performing is them caring for their employers, so their employers can reciprocate and care back for them. Right. And I believe this needs to be maybe not transactional, but a reciprocal arrangement. And sometimes, we struggle to see that. What do you think, Arif?
So we're saying that the employers need to demonstrate the care to their senior leaders in the same way we expect senior leaders to demonstrate the care to their employees.
And let's not put leaders necessarily on the spot, right?
Okay.
Even if an organization in itself, we've talked about organizations being families, or maybe not so much, but essentially, you can think about it as a system. And in my mind, all these things in this wheel need to be balanced. And I don't mean balanced for you as a person, because the company, the organization isn't just a service provider for you, providing these, but also I think it's your responsibility, whether you're a leader or not, to provide these for your company so it all balances out, right? There's this, you have to put this in to get this back. Or maybe you get this back, but you're expected to put some of it in yourself. It doesn't go one way, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, I can see that. There's a reciprocal kind of transactional behavior you're looking for. I think there's definitely merits to that. I would also say, excuse me, I think it's just very simple and nothing. It doesn't have to be as complex, other than just be more human centric. What I mean by that is, I think in the article you shared they describe it a bit more, which is looking at how you can create an environment where all of this doesn't have to be compromised, but you are showing up for people and you are helping them and answering all the challenges they're coming up with, whether it's well-being related, whether it's their wellness, as we said, caring for them in the right way, over communicating with them about priorities and all the rest of it. I think just being more present and all of that, and being more involved in supporting them, I think you just end up creating the right effects naturally. That's what I would say.
You are, right? Yeah. But you have to think about these people as adults, as humans.
Sure.
There's this famous case that, Amazon is obviously pushing quite a bit for the return to office, and Spotify responded with like, well, we've hired adults, so let's not treat them as children, which is possibly a decent example when it comes to maybe seeing people as real humans. And again, with non-linear career, maybe it's about seeing them as their wonderful selves, not necessarily following a pattern that we traditionally would see, but having so much to add to an organization. I mean, this is a big one for many people. Maybe if you are pursuing a non-linear career as a leader, I think the difficulty is you might not be following a standard narrative. You might not be going into a typical thing, a typical scenario that people are looking for, a typical pattern. And in that case, the big question is, how do you put yourself forward to make sure you're being noticed for the great person you are? So that's my takeaway from this conversation. What about yourself, Arif?
I think it goes back to what I said earlier, which is this idea: we all have agency, we all have choice, and no matter what you're doing in your career, wherever you are, take a moment, step back, assess your own skills, capabilities, look at the experiences you've had, the memories you've created, and then think for yourself, what is it that your next step looks like? It might not necessarily need to be the same kind of position, role that you've had before. It could be something entirely different, where you can best apply the skills you've learned and the experiences you've gained. I know that's easier said than done, but it's something to consider, I think, and you have choices in how you want to go about doing that. That's all I'd say.
Definitely. And one thing that I'm sure that there's a choice to do, and it's actually easier than you might think, is subscribing to our podcast if you're here for the first time. If you're a regular listener, making sure you tune in every Friday morning. Thank you for this wonderful time, Arif, with you and our listeners. We're obviously back really soon with our next episode. So give us a like, give us a comment, and stay tuned for the next episode of Leading with Agility. Thank you and bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.